Gee, you think you know a squirrel? Sandy Cheeks went to a Halloween party full of fish, dressed as a goldfish. Is this like bikini bottom blackface? I mean, Sandy is technically the minority there, so it's more like a black guy dressing up as like a rich white frat boy. So still specist, species racist. Just that the minority is making fun of the majority, but to think something is iced means they see themselves superior to the other. I doubt Sandy sees herself as a superior species when she chooses to live underwater with a bunch of fish. If anything, she's just trying to fit in. Okay, I think that's better. I mean, if anything, it's like a hey, I want to show my appreciation of your species and culture in the form of this silly costume. Look up Nuka Zeus for a wild ride. Ah, a person of culture, I see. That pay money wabi video was a roller coaster mayo. Can't wait to see that live interview next Sunday lol. I didn't know he was doing a live interview. Thank you for this. But then a minority but very vocal individuals on Twitter would be like, oh, it's cultural appropriation and shit like that. You're getting weirdly invested in crafting a law for a 2-panel meme lol. Except there was an entire episode dedicated to Sandy trying to prove land critters are better than sea critters. That's true, but you can still perpetuate racist speciesist whateverist stereotypes without prejudiced intent. A white dude without a racist bone in his body would still be unwelcome if he showed up to a party in a majority black neighborhood in blackface. But we don't really know the attitude of Bikini Bottom in being represented that way through costume. No one seems to bat an eye at it, so I assume they don't mind. I wish your last part could echo in the ears of everyone who wants to start an argument. This is so well said. People are really trying to start an argument over an animated squirrel dressing up like a fish. The internet is weird. This ism equals something plus power itself is a flaming hot invitation to argument. I mean, you are in Bikini Bottom Twitter. Yeah, there's no implications that Bikini Bottom ever had something like a racial caste system in its past, or immigration exclusion laws, or imperialism or slavery, or even major class struggles at all. Without those things, Bikini Bottom would probably not have had a reform period and have to treat racism more harshly in order to change an existing social norms of a racist social structure, probably leading to a more chill attitude in that culture about race. Also, racism would be complicated in a Spongebob world because they aren't races of the same species. They are entirely different species with different biology, which is an element not there with humans. Not that I give a shit. I'm just being analytical about race relations in a kid's show for fun. The land critters versus sea critters was about racism. That's a good example, but what I meant in my comment they'd have a more chill attitude about race wasn't that they have no racism at all, just that they care less about it when it happens because it doesn't carry the same weight. Like that episode may be about a strength contest between races, but we're also not told that land versus sea is like some big long-standing issue boiling underneath the surface. It's just a temporary conflict between like 5 people that is resolved by the end of the episode. I think the better question is, would treating anchovies or snails or clams or jellyfish different be racist in this universe? Because they clearly act differently than the rest of Bikini Bottom. It's a little different in this situation since it's the minority doing it here, although I doubt there have been centuries of fish oppressing underwater squirrels or vice versa to put a really racist charge behind it. Since no one seems to care, though, we can probably assume everyone is okay with it. I like Sandy, but I always thought that she does see herself as a superior species because, to me, she always felt like a scientist choosing to live with the subject that she's studying, like Jane Goodall. Pretty much. So if I went to a black neighborhood and wore blackface to fit in, they can't get mad at me. Cool, try it. Number. Someone can be racist without seeing themselves as superior to the other. Anyone can be racist if they act racist to a group. This is a pretty deep thread for a sub that's dedicated to Spongebob memes. I mean, yeah, in a perfect world, or a world where people read minds, a white guy would get destroyed if they put blackface on. Even if their motive was completely genuine and they genuinely love the shit out of black people. In today's world, motive is kinda irrelevant. And when it's not, people generally assume the worst anyway. I doubt Sandy sees herself as a superior species when she chooses to live underwater with a bunch of fish. She's from Texas. She 100% views herself as superior to the other species since they aren't from Texas. Source: Texan. That's a somewhat disingenuous comment though. The number 2 is greater than the number 1. It doesn't matter if you view 1 as greater than 2, because it's not. It doesn't matter if someone views being a Texan as greater than anyone else, because it just is a fact. Texans are greater than anyone else. Oklahoma in shambles. Oklahoma is dire. Texas. They took something good, fucked it up on purpose, took all the good stuff out, and then called it its own thing. But to think something is iced means they see themselves superior to the other. Not necessarily. The white folks in Get Out were fully racist. To give an example easy to understand, Sandy has specifically made the claim that land creatures are better than sea creatures. Spongebob and Patrick literally equated her homeland to stupidity. They definitely feel superior to her. Yay, it's not like this is a decades-old cartoon laced with jokes. Except for that time she didn't got into a pissing match with everybody in the Krusty Krab. Yo, but there was a whole episode where she was trying to prove that land critters were better than sea critters. Granted, Spongebob was trying to prove the reverse. So use blackface in Chicago's South Side to make friends. Got it. Didn't she go underwater to study them? Jane Goodall style. You think doing blackface implies one believes himself to be superior to black people? She was there to do research originally. There was a whole episode about Sandy thinking she was superior, but being put in her place when she couldn't breathe underwater. The message was that everyone can't be best at everything. The whole episode pressure was about her trying to prove air breathers' superiority over ocean dwellers. Lol. I don't think it's racism. I don't consider something racism unless someone shows hatred towards another race. This definitely isn't. Squirrels can't be specist. Reserve specism isn't a thing. Is the smell of hardwood and cork. What does being the minority have to do with anything? A white guy can do blackface in Africa and it's still pretty wrong. That's more what this is like. Especially since Sandy is a goldfish in a fishbowl. That's like if a white guy went to a costume party in Africa dressed like an enslaved black guy. She needs that helmet to live. It's not part of the costume. The line she says in that picture on the left is why I'm a pet goldfish in a bowl. So this is like a white guy in Africa with vitiligo in a black face? Exactly. She's showing a painful moment in the collective fish species history. Can a black guy do whiteface? White chicks. Blackface is racist because it was used by white people to caricature black people in performances. Unless squirrels have a long history of enslaving fish and dressing up as them to make fun of them at the theater, it's not really racist. I mean, there was a whole episode where Spongebob did stand up and made fun of Sandy's appearance. BC she's a squirrel and said she's dumb. BC of it. That's kinda a good signal that there's a level of prejudice against her. Don't forget that episode where literally every main character hanged up on her and tried to tell her that sea creatures were superior to her. Granted, she did sort of instigate it, but it started out as banter between her and Spongebob and it turned into everyone ganging up on her. And she was right. She successfully found a way to live underwater for like her entire life. Spongebob and the gang tried to do the same thing on land and nearly died in like 5 minutes. She's also an immigrant, a squirrel, and a Texan. It's a dangerous mix. It's like Dave Chappelle doing How White Anchor skit. Scratch that. Dave Chappelle did a lot of whiteface. To be fair, it was funny. But land dwellers have more institutional power, so POW. People of water are always the minority. Wasn't there 2 episode where she says she's from Texas? So Spongebob and Patrick act really racist? It's like Dave Chappelle doing his white anchor skit. Scratch that. Dave Chappelle did a lot of whiteface. To be fair, it was funny. But land dwellers have more institutional power, so POW. People of water are always the minority. So blackface is cool depending on your intention? Or is the black guy racist in your scenario? B. But Incidental 24 isn't a white fish. Yes, that is his name. It must be Kyle Rogers. Shrug. I think the more important thing that people are forgetting to talk about is the fact that blackface was used to make fun of and dehumanize black people. And as far as we are aware, there is no big historical reference that showcases members of other species wearing fish heads to make fun of or harm fish as a species in the Spongebob universe. That would be a wild episode. Well, there was the episode where Spongebob was telling squirrel jokes and even dressed like one. Yeah, people forget that Spongebob told racist jokes about squirrels and Texas. Yeah, if anything, Spongebob in that episode had a lot more similarities in his behavior to people who did actual blackface. He did buck teeth impressions too. As an Asian American, I felt that episode. Yeah, now that I think about it, that episode was quite fucked up. Spongebob started doing jokes based on squirrels, of which Sandy is the only one in town. When he noticed that these jokes were doing better than his other jokes, he started making them more and more extreme. After which public opinion about squirrels started to shift. And since Sandy is literally the only squirrel in Bikini Bottom, she received a ton of harassment. It started getting so bad that she herself started believing those made up stereotypes. It was only when Spongebob came to visit his squirrel friend and seeing how she has changed since he started making squirrel jokes that he realized the actual effects of his actions. Had he not known her, he might have continued to joke about squirrels until Sandy would have been driven out of town, either because she would choose to move to avoid enduring harassment or by force from the people of town. And although Spongebob stopped joking about squirrels when he realized the horrible things that it caused to his friend, it's likely that other aspiring comedians saw his success and would continue where he left off. This is real. Like this happens to us non-fiction human beings. The difference is, Spongebob is friends with Sandy, so he asked and listened. Most ignorant people who do this are not friends to those they discriminate. They simply do not care. It's a good episode though. Teaches a valuable lesson and not lightly either. I know, and I'm honestly really surprised how well that episode portrayed it. Yeah, the whole purpose of that episode was to prepare kids to learn about the whole spectrum of racism, from just a joke all the way to internalized stereotypes and majority pressures. I don't think it was as messed up as it seems in terms of dealing with a serious subject, considering kids of color are already encountering these issues as young as elementary age. Still depressing and a messed up concept itself for sure. Even as a kid I felt that episode, and I think that was their point. I definitely walked away thinking about how other felt when I would make jokes as kid. I thought they did a good job of teaching kids why bullying is bad. I'm gonna need one of those ethereal snake style videos on that. Came here looking for this comment. I think people get too hung up on the what and not enough on the why with these kinds of things. I think there could be another issue though. She's not just a goldfish. She's a goldfish in a bowl. Bingo. Yeah, that's what makes it offensive, emo. Sandy be advocating for tiny ass goldfish bowls. Yeah, but my grimdark implications in nice things though. Either way, humans treat goldfish is pretty fucked up. It definitely is, and I'd personally say that it's pretty cruel for Sandy to base her costume on that joke. However, my point was that dressing up as fish as a method of mockery doesn't have the same history in the society of Bikini Bottom as blackface has in our society. Was the blackface a common thing in the pre-civil rights movement USA? I am just interested, since we don't learn much about it here in Europe. Yes, it was started as a trend a very long time ago in the 19th century and only started to become something that is largely looked down upon in the late 20th century. There is a large amount of presidents and politicians who did blackface all the way up to the 80s, and there are an awful lot of Looney Tunes that followed the trend.